hydrogen was the one thing that it was unbelievable. Like I said, my father was a big eye opener to me when I started seeing issues go away with him not changing anything. I was like, this is unbelievable. How is that truly possible?
Our next guest has the moniker Greg the Hydrogen Man. Greg has dedicated himself to educating the public about the profound health benefits of molecular hydrogen therapy.
And I made a promise, actually. I said, I promise that if you can help guide me find the answers to these issues that I'm having, I promise that I'll share them with the world, what it is that I discovered. And I did not expect my life to go down this path, because something really did change probably within a week or two of that prayer. And what I decided to do was...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Our next guest has the moniker Greg the Hydrogen Man. He is a hydrogen therapy specialist, researcher, and he advocates for hydrogen therapy on his YouTube channel, Uprising 144K Hydrogen Man. Greg has dedicated himself to educating the public about the profound health benefits of molecular hydrogen therapy, sharing insights through his YouTube channel and various media appearances. Today, we'll explore the science behind H2, hydrogen gas, its unique role as a selective antioxidant, and why Greg believes it could be the most powerful yet overlooked health breakthrough of our time. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So before we jump into your area of expertise, I always like to go further back, like much further back. What was it like growing up, little Greg? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? If there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a champion of hydrogen therapy, generating focused content, what or who might they be?
Well, I don't know how much that plays a role, but I mean, I hate to say this, but a lot of my past is actually quite sad and has probably a large role to play in why I got so sick, which is why I discovered hydrogen. Ultimately, when my mother does have an educational background, so she was a professor at a major university. And so their education was always really big, in my family. And so I really learned a lot about that. I was going to be a teacher and, quote unquote, a professor. And I really know a lot about, quote unquote, education, and I do a lot of self-education. That's how obviously this whole thing got created. And so the only issue is that I had a lot of turmoil when I was really young. And sadly, I didn't want to live. And so I did some pretty terrible things to myself when I was extremely young, many times trying to basically end my life. And that's partially, in my opinion, what caused a lot of my medical issues, because I did things that really, I wasn't even supposed to survive. I literally had a doctor tell me that I was an absolute miracle for surviving some of the things that I'd done to myself, which obviously I regret, but hopefully we can turn those lemons into lemonade with all the things that I've discovered. And so it's been a really big deal for me to try to share a lot of the information. I've seen so much suffering, especially when I worked in the medical field for over 2 decades. The amount of patients that come in, the people you work with and deal with, and then you see what Western medicine, really behind the scenes, what it can and cannot do. And that was really a big eye opener. And so, so that's kind of the beginning of all this. But my parents were always extremely, really good people, and people who really have supported me, in the journey. And I've actually been able to even help them with a lot of their medical issues with all these protocols that I created and all these discoveries that are made that are quite different than the average person. Though I think I see a lot of people starting to copy a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about for such a long time. And so I think it's going to be more and more well known as time goes on.
So you had a pretty tumultuous, was it all the way through childhood, or, often it's, in high school, that's where a lot of challenges, or maybe middle school. And then a lot of those challenges led you to some bad decisions that ultimately probably caused some damage. Is that a correct assessment?
My issues started mostly when I was 7 or 8 years old. So it was really young. And so by the time, the very first time I tried to, quote unquote, end my existence here was when I was around 10 years old. Wow. And so I tried many times because I kept failing, and every time was always with some type of poison. I was always trying to poison myself. And so you can imagine the issues that caused. And, it was terrible. But, I think the things that I've learned that got me out of those situations, both emotional turmoil and then eventually physical turmoil, I really put myself through a lot of terrible things. But the things that I discovered, I really feel are priceless and really, really important. But yeah, it was a tough road. It wasn't
Yeah.
fun.
So let's walk us through kind of the farther down the road and moving into the positive space. I don't want to, we don't have to dwell there. So you're experiencing health challenges partly because of how you've treated yourself. What are some of those challenges, and what is the straw that broke the camel's back that really said, okay, I've got to buckle down and figure some health, benefits for myself?
Yeah, I did start having issues in my 20s, but by the time I was in my early 30s, roughly, is I literally couldn't walk. So
Mm,
it got so bad. So a lot of the issues that I had were, one, I had autoimmune issues. I had a lot of different gut issues. I had some tumors in my body, and I had so much pain in my joints, so much inflammation that I literally, this is when I remember where I had a major breakdown, is I had a remote control and I literally couldn't work the remote control for the TV because I was in so much pain. And I was just sitting there. I was sitting on the couch because I couldn't walk. Not being able to work the remote control, really kind of broke me emotionally, because I
mm,
used to be quite athletic actually. And, and not to mention that I did have a heart condition on top of it all, which I was told by a cardiologist was going to end my life in 10 years or less. I also had issues like my kidneys and my liver were not working, quote unquote, optimally. And so those were just a lot of the issues that I was ultimately having. My immune system was absolute garbage on top of it all, by the way. So I would get sick really easily, and it was very, very difficult to recover. It would literally take me a month or more to recover from a cold or something. And then I would literally catch a cold again, literally within like a week or two. And
mm.
it was just horrible. One thing after another. It was very, very traumatic, to be quite honest with you, especially the pain. They would give me these crazy, crazy pain medicine, and it wouldn't even make a dent. It wouldn't do absolutely anything for me. And some of the medicine would make me shake because they would give you these like opioids, and they would give me morphines and certain drugs that my body just wasn't liking. And that's all they wanted to do is give me band-aids, for pain and inflammation. So that was kind of the gist of it.
And then you hit some sort of form of rock bottom, and then now I've got to start taking my own decisions, taking my own healthcare into my own hands. What are some of the first things that you tried? And then I know you ultimately ended up with hydrogen therapy, but walk us through a little bit of that path that ultimately led you to hydrogen therapy.
So the first thing I started doing was of course, I'm researching, I'm looking on YouTube, I'm seeing a lot of so-called like health professionals or these podcasts and different things. So I tried, honestly, I've tried just about everything. And it's been a long journey where I burned through all through all my money. And then eventually, obviously I couldn't work either when I got really sick and it got worse. But I tried all the like carnivore diets, so many different types of diets, to be quite honest. I tried almost every diet that I could think of. That wasn't really helping. Of course, I was trying all sorts of different supplements. I was also trying all sorts of different like health machines that people claim would help you. And obviously, I tried just the Western medicine in general. That obviously didn't really help me at all either. So I really just tried a ton of different stuff. And then I started getting really frustrated when I would watch a podcast where somebody would say one thing. Like you have one guy saying, hey, you should drink this type of water or eat this type of food. And then you'll have a separate one saying exactly the opposite.
Mm.
And so you're literally like, what am I supposed to do? I got one person telling me one thing, one person telling me the other. They both sound extremely convincing. And so ultimately what I did, I mean, I really did have a major, major breakdown with that remote control story that I was telling you when I wanted to work the TV. And I just started crying. I think, we've all had our low points. And at our low point, what did I do? I prayed, not to get too spiritual or anything, but I made a prayer and I just asked for, God above to help guide me and find the right answers. So, and I made a promise, actually. I said, I promise that if you can help guide me find the answers to these issues that I'm having, I promise that I'll share them with the world, what it is that I discovered. And I did not expect my life to go down this path because something really did change probably within a week or two of that prayer. And what I decided to do was instead of listening to all this other advice, like, I hate to say this is going to sound kind of weird, but I really just started looking at a lot of scientific evidence and reading scientific data on my own, doing a lot of my own critical thinking, and really just trying to find my own way, because I didn't know who to trust anymore as far as who I was going to be listening to. And so that's basically where I also stumbled upon the science of molecular hydrogen. It's not the only thing that's part of my protocols, but it is extremely foundational, and it's the most powerful thing I've ever seen as far as how not only affected my health, but even people that I care about, people in my family, friends, the things that I've seen. And I mean, I'm even helping, there's like these healing centers that I've been helping with certain protocols, and the things that we've seen are just mind-blowing. Even I can't believe, the things that I've actually witnessed and the medical conditions that I've seen literally disappear. And I always like to give my disclaimer, I don't give medical advice, I don't make any medical claims, and I don't make any claims for or against any product or products. So everything is just my opinion. But this has been my path, and it's literally my protocols is what got me my life back. And I could probably tell you at some point all the other issues that I've seen disappear with these protocols. It's unbelievable. I still can't believe it.
That's pretty amazing. It sounds like at some point you became, and this phrase is going around, the CEO of your own health, right? And started digging in and doing the research. And then you've been sharing a lot on your YouTube channel, and it's Uprising 144K Hydrogen Man. Where's that name come from? What's the story behind that name?
There's a lot of things about the word. First of all, uprising, like, when you're really sick and you're bedridden, or people who die and they're buried, it's like you're rising up from amongst the dead. You're coming back to life, because I felt like I was literally halfway dead. Technically, from what I've been told, I literally shouldn't even be alive right now. That's how serious my medical issues were. And I shouldn't be alive, and yet not only alive, I'm literally thriving. There was a guy, I did a video on this, I've had a lot of testing done on me and a lot of blood work too. And I mean, I've literally had doctors, I remember the last doctor who called me, it's kind of a funny story, but usually in Western medicine, when a doctor calls you, it's not good news.
Yeah.
The way it goes in Western medicine is, if everything looks good, they don't call you, because they don't have time to call everybody and say, hey, your blood looked great. But this lady doctor called me, and I got really nervous when she called, and I said, just tell me what you found. And she said, I want you to relax. Everything looks great. To be honest, she said, in over 30 years of me being literally a professional, looking all, so much blood work, she said, I've never seen blood like yours in my life. She said, it's actually so incredible, I had to call you. She said, I want to know what you're doing, because I'd like to actually apply it to my patients and even my own daughter and even myself, because this has been the big thing that I've noticed with doctors that reach out to me. They either want to know my protocols or they want them for their own family members. And it's really kind of funny how they kind of secretly do that. But yeah, the protocols are clearly working, and I've seen them work for numerous things. I mean, things that you probably wouldn't even believe. For me, it's been pretty shocking. Like, I've literally seen cancerous tumors disappear. I've literally worked with people who have like macular degeneration, which is supposed to be incurable, which is an eye condition. I've seen macular degeneration go away. I mean, all the high blood pressure and diabetes and high cholesterol and arthritis, I mean, all those are actually really easy. Even my own heart condition, I was told that I needed open heart surgery for it. Otherwise, it was going to end my life. My cardiologist was blown away when my heart condition just mysteriously disappeared. I never needed the surgery. My condition just disappeared, and I'm still here. And so it's been really, really a wild run. It's unbelievable.
So this doctor, I'm assuming she was with you on the journey, right? So at some point she's doing blood tests on you and they're not good. And then you get this kind of last result that you mentioned, and everything is so good that she wants to know what protocols, or did you just come in out of the blue and your blood looked so good that she wanted kind of access to your protocols?
So this lady did not work with me, because I kept seeing different doctors. I kept seeing different naturopaths. I had so much blood work, and this one was literally towards the very end, because I've been doing my protocols and I needed to do blood work to make sure that what I was doing was working. I didn't want to do something that wasn't working. And one of my big goals is overcoming all nutritional deficiencies. So I decided on that based on scientific data that I read many years ago. And so I was like, you know what? I have to overcome all nutritional deficiencies, because the data clearly shows that when you have a deficiency, it can lead to disease. Obviously, a very popular example is like a deficiency in vitamin C. A deficiency in vitamin C will obviously cause scurvy. How do you resolve scurvy? it's not a pharmaceutical. You just have to get your vitamin C levels right. And so I thought maybe my issues were being caused by deficiencies because nobody knew what was really causing my issues. And so that was one of the things that I was really trying to do, is overcome all my nutritional deficiencies. But it wasn't the only thing. This was more of a gut instinct thing because I kept hearing talks about water, but everybody was saying, hey, drink different types of water. So eventually I asked myself, I'm like, what do I really want in my water or out of my water? And I was like, I just want clean water. And so then I even have some lab reports here, third-party lab testing, as far as water is concerned, because everybody was telling you to drink a different type of water. And so I had to discover, it took a lot of work. I had to discover every water filtration modality, what it can and cannot filter out. I wanted the cleanest water. And then, of course, hydrogen, which not only is it amazing, but then I realized there's numerous different ways to make it, pluses and minuses of making it different ways. What kind of levels do I need? What potential impurities and dangers are there from using the hydrogen incorrectly? How do you use it to do it correctly? And then I had to learn about engineering, because I had to learn about all these different machines, the science of metallurgy. I mean, the whole thing is just, I was able to simplify it and make it really easy for people, but the journey took a very long time.
Yeah, okay, so you're struggling, you're kind of testing out different diets, you kind of land on hydrogen and a couple other protocols, and we might get to those. And I have to assume you said you noticed benefits within days, I think is what you said. Then you go in and you got to do research, because that's the kind of person that you seem to be. So as you're kind of understanding what is hydrogen doing in your system, like what does molecular hydrogen, how does it interact with the body at the cellular level?
So the very first research study ever done was literally on the mitochondria. So I think this is really important because they're realizing that a lot of medical conditions they're basically like metabolic disorders. Like cancer appears to be actually a metabolic disorder. But personally, I think everything works synergistically. That's just like a car. You could have the best engine, but if you don't have good tires or any tires on the car, it's not going to really drive. And so in regards to hydrogen, they don't know everything about what it does. I mean, we know that it functions as a selective antioxidant. And it's really important that people understand that not all antioxidants are created equal, by the way. A lot of people don't know that antioxidants actually come in different sizes. So vitamin C is a certain size. I wish I had a chart for you. CoQ10 is a certain size. Vitamin E is a certain size. But molecular hydrogen is so tiny that it can literally go right into the core of the mitochondria. And because it works as a selective antioxidant, it really helps with a lot of the free radical damage, reactive oxygen species, ROS, stuff like this. But there's so much stuff, like obviously it's extremely good for the gut. That's been another really good one. The way that it helps regulate the pH in the blood, the way that it appears to work as an anti-inflammatory. On and on it goes. I mean, it's not like there's like 50 studies on hydrogen or maybe 100 studies. There's over 2,000 studies. I believe there's almost 200 medical conditions that it's been shown to be effective for. So there's so much that it does, but the truth is that even the experts in the world don't actually know the full spectrum of how exactly hydrogen works. It's kind of like saying, what does water do in the body? I mean, there's so much stuff, or even what oxygen does in the body. And so I think the biggest thing that I've noticed about hydrogen, like a lot of other things, you don't want to be deficient in it. And people don't realize that your body actually produces hydrogen. And as you age, your production of hydrogen is actually going lower and lower and lower. And another thing that I did as far as trying to figure out my protocols is I observe nature a lot. So I'm a big fan of observing nature for looking for answers, as much as science and as much as even ancient books and ancient wisdom, which is another reason I've spent a lot of time in Japan, because they do and know things that the world doesn't know about. There's very little that I think people really know that the Japanese have knowledge of. And obviously they're the ones who discovered molecular hydrogen. Even the equipment I use is Japanese, where most of the equipment out there is literally made from China, or they ship Chinese stuff to Korea so they can claim it's made in Korea. But pretty much everything's coming out of China. And so, which in my opinion is not a very good thing from everything that I've seen. But yeah, hydrogen I think what was easier, and this is what they noticed in a lot of the lab studies in Japan, is they saw the improvement on medical conditions, tons of them. I wish I could show you some of the footage they did on some mice, which was really wild. And so they see that it's working. the biggest thing is trying to figure out exactly what it's doing. Like I said, they have a rough idea, but they really don't know the majority of what exactly hydrogen is doing to the body. But there is a place in nature that makes it. Have you heard of a place called Lourdes, France?
No.
So Lourdes, France is known for having like this holy water or these healing waters of Lourdes, and people travel from all over the world, and it's like a holy site basically. And nobody really knew. They thought it was placebo, people drinking the water from the holy waters of Lourdes, France. And everybody thought it was a placebo. They sent a lot of scientists. They studied the water. Nobody could figure out what it was because everybody just said it's just H2O until the Japanese actually, because it takes a lot of detailed research, but eventually they discovered that that water had high levels of molecular hydrogen. And that's when they really started doing a lot of research in Japan, starting with mice. And the effects were just unbelievable. And so again, this is something from nature. It's the same thing for the water that I personally use and recommend. It's the way that planet Earth actually filters water. So I mimic the way that it does it. So a lot of things on my protocols are things that are, again, they make sense scientifically, but I also try to mimic nature as much as possible.
It's interesting. So the Lourdes waters in France, right? In the country of France, they've got the hydrogen, and it makes sense because if you were to just throw that in a bottle and transport it somewhere and then look at it and try and see what's different about it, the hydrogen has escaped already. Like I think it's hard to express how small H2 molecules are. Because they basically get out of everything. You know, I think a lot of people think, oh, you can hold H2 with steel. No, you can get hydrogen steel embrittlement from hydrogen's presence around steel because the hydrogen is actually going through the steel, and that process can make it brittle as opposed to malleable. So it's interesting because it makes sense. I'm sure lots of people like grabbed some of this Lourdes water and shipped it off, and you know there was nothing special about it. I'm assuming the Japanese at some point went there and were able to kind of test it real time. And let me ask one other thing. We always associate, or historically we associate hot springs with being places of healing. Is there an elevated level of hydrogen in hot spring water? No. Okay.
No, but you're kind of hitting on a huge secret that I'm holding back on right now. I haven't said anything publicly yet because I just think it would cause some issues in the world, which I won't talk about right now. But what I can tell you is there are a few places on planet Earth where there's water with elevated molecular hydrogen. And by the way, you're hitting a really good point because that's where all the scientists failed, is that they were shipping the water to a lab and there was no hydrogen by the time it got there. And the Japanese were smart enough to test it on site. And this is part of their brilliance. I mean, the Japanese are so detail oriented. I really do love the work and the things that they impact the world in such a big way that I don't think the average person really knows how they've really truly impacted the world. But yes, they absolutely discovered that water had high levels of molecular hydrogen. Just like other places, there's a place in Germany also that has a sacred spring that has high levels of hydrogen. There's a place in Mexico called Tlacote, Mexico. They also have healing waters. But there's not a ton of them that have been discovered as of yet, but I do believe there'll be more. And I have made a discovery myself of what I believe is a very, very, I believe it to be extremely sacred, but the world doesn't know anything about it yet. And I don't want to say where I discovered and what it is just yet, because I'm afraid that too many people will try to go to that area and maybe disrupt it, because almost nobody knows about it at this time. And it's, I think it's a very, very special place in the entire planet Earth. So we'll probably touch on that someday.
Oh, that's really cool. So I read a paper that was talking about inflammatory markers on the surface of the skin. The participants consume some hydrogen water, and then relatively quickly, and I'm talking in minutes, like I think probably in 15 minutes, the inflammatory markers on the surface of the skin were reduced. Right, because this hydrogen molecule just goes everywhere, and that's what it was attributed to. Any thoughts on the ability of hydrogen to address inflammation? And by the way, this is neither one of us sells hydrogen, neither one of us is promoting hydrogen, and I want to talk about that in a second. So we're not making claims, we're sharing our understanding of something that we don't make money off of, and because we don't make money, or because even if we did, just don't believe us, just go do the research yourself. But any thoughts on hydrogen and its impact on inflammation?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, my father was really an interesting example because my protocols, a lot of people, including my own father, he didn't want to follow a lot of the protocols because it's too much work. He's like, I don't want to change my diet. I want to be able to continue to go somewhere, have a cheeseburger, French fries, a beer, travel places, have fun, drink tap water, whatever, you know. He's like, your protocols are too difficult. But my father was having issues with arthritis, blood pressure, cholesterol, glaucoma, and he had one other thing, diabetes. And so the only thing that he was willing to do, he said, look, the only thing I'm willing to do is do the water purification process that I suggest and that I personally do. And he said, and use that hydrogen stuff the way that you have created, because I created my own protocols. And he did that. I honestly didn't think it would work for all his issues, considering the way his lifestyle and he's a little overweight and this type of stuff. I was shocked when all his issues went away. Especially the one that really shocked everybody was, especially his doctors, was his glaucoma, because he had glaucoma for over 3 decades, and he gets his eyes checked every year. So he is very, very well documented patient. And when he went in for his annual checkup and he showed no glaucoma, even his eye doctor didn't believe it. He said, he goes, there's something wrong. We must have done something wrong or something wrong with our equipment. There is no way that your glaucoma has disappeared. It always gets worse with age, not better. And we've seen you forever. So they brought him back again, same tests, same result. He doesn't have glaucoma. They did it again. They just wouldn't quit. And by the time the 4th time came around, they basically referred him to one of the top specialists in the United States because they said, we know you have glaucoma. And by the time they did some more testing with more intricate equipment, they basically came back and said, we don't know what to tell you, but we're showing that you basically don't have glaucoma, and this is unbelievable. We've never seen anything like it. And since then, I've modified my eye protocols because I've worked with people with torn retinas, with cataracts, macular degeneration, a lot of different eye issues, even people with dementia and Alzheimer's. Some of the results that I got on that, I mean, I had testimonials. There was a daughter who got it for her mother with Alzheimer's and dementia, and she said, the results are so spectacular. She said, is this normal? She sent me before and after pictures, wrote me her whole story. I mean, her mother didn't recognize her own daughter. She was, in the pictures, you can see in her face, her eyes just look like black, like she just doesn't know anything. She's staring off into a daze. And by the time she used hydrogen for months, her mother was smiling. She recognized her own daughter again. I really think that some of the stuff that I've come up with is revolutionary. I'm going to try to toot my own horn here, but the things that I've seen, it's so hard for me to believe that the world doesn't actually know. And it saddens me when the world talks about, like, not to pick on these guys, I'm not going to name names, but when I see like these little hydrogen bottles, you know, these things, they kind of bug me because of, I don't think people are talking enough about the potential dangers of making and using hydrogen incorrectly. Nobody's talking about that. I'm like literally the only guy. There's been a little talk about it in Japan, but only by experts. There's a guy over there who's a hydrogen specialist who also he happens to be a neurosurgeon. So this guy really knows his stuff, and he literally only recommends one machine out of all the machines out there, and he doesn't even get paid. So it's not about money. He says there's only one machine that he recommends for his patients because he thinks all the other stuff is potentially dangerous, or either that or it really won't do anything for his patients. And so this has been the biggest eye-opener for me on going into the hydrogen world and into the water world, by the way, too. I've seen some interesting lab tests that have literally shown water filters making the water, literally contaminating the water, if you can believe that. So that's been another really big one too. So there's a lot to unpack, and a lot that I believe a lot of the, I won't name names, but the health industry or alternative health industry, I believe doesn't want out. And I think a lot of it is, well, money and corruption as usual, just like the government.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So what would some of the dangers be, right? Like, my understanding is you've got all hydrogen that you might want in water, and then it's typically electrolysis that would separate the hydrogen from the oxygen, and so you'd be left with H2 and an oxygen molecule. What dangers might there be in that process?
There's tons of them, actually, because first of all, there's numerous ways to, again, make the hydrogen. You can use electrolysis as part of the process, but there's actually different ways to implement electrolysis. There's also chemical reactions. So people literally sell hydrogen tablets or these hydrogen pills. In my personal opinion, I think that's pure insanity. I'm not the only one. I talked to a chemist from a major university who just is like, he can't believe that this is something that's actually out there. Japan does not do that for a reason, but America seems to be the wild, wild west. And I can give you an example. I'll give you one example with the hydrogen tablets. And I've even seen lab reports on this, but here's the first thing. Molecular hydrogen is pH neutral. Okay, this is really important. You don't want to alter pH when you're making medical hydrogen, basically, to use in a medical way. So when you use a hydrogen tablet, it completely alters the pH of the water. In fact, it makes it very acidic. So if you're making it correctly, it should be pH neutral. So that to me is one red flag. The second one, hydrogen, remember, it's odorless, colorless, and tasteless, and pH neutral. Hydrogen tablets, they miss on all those fronts. It makes the water acidic. It makes the water, it's not colorless because the water turns like gray, like metal.
Like cloudy.
It's not, yeah, it turns cloudy, but it's gray. And the hydrogen tablets also are not odorless. They actually stink. If you've ever smelled it, it smells like something's burning. And it's not tasteless. It actually tastes like crap. A lot of the companies are trying to put other ingredients in it to try to cover up the tastes. So it really doesn't fall in line with anything that would be done correctly. No medical professional that is a hydrogen specialist in Japan uses hydrogen tablets. It's, in my opinion, is foolish. That's my opinion. But that's just one thing. Then when you start doing the electrolysis process that you were speaking of, here's one of the fundamental problems. The science of metal, so the metallurgy, comes into huge play when making hydrogen. So some companies are literally using stainless steel along with something called sodium hydroxide, which is lye, which is the same ingredient or the main ingredient that's in Drano. Again, in my opinion, a really foolish move. You don't want to be using that stuff to make hydrogen correctly. And then on top of it, the Chinese, or supposedly the Koreans, but I really believe it's the Chinese from my research, they're using plated metal. So you have to understand that when you're sending electrical current through water with plated metals, what do you think is going to happen, Chris?
Some of the metal ions are going to come loose and get dumped into the water.
And don't you think that's of a concern?
Yeah, it would. Well, depending on the metal, right? Some people who love silver, if there were silver electrodes, might think that that's a good thing. But yeah, it would depend on the metal for sure.
And for me, what really, I believe, really helped me overcome my medical issues, a huge one is purity in everything. I wanted the most purest water. I wanted the most purest hydrogen. I wanted the most purest food without chemicals, pesticides, herbicides. I was trying to live this cleanest lifestyle while overcoming nutritional deficiencies. I mean, these were part of my goals. And I don't think it's too far-fetched. And ultimately, it worked really good. I was quite shocked how good these protocols work. But I hate to say that I don't think I would have gone this far if it wasn't for hydrogen. Because a lot of those protocols I felt like helped me like only 10%. Hydrogen was the one thing that it was unbelievable. Like I said, my father was a big eye-opener to me when I started seeing issues go away with him not changing anything. I was like, this is unbelievable. How is that truly possible? And so anyway, not to mention the other thing that a lot of hydrogen companies, again, which remain nameless, are trying to hide is the membranes. So the membranes that are being used in a lot of these products they were being made by a company called DuPont. I don't know if you know DuPont, that big chemical. Not a lot of people are fond of that company, and I'm not. That's almost used in almost every device there is. And the biggest problem is that companies are now trying to hide that fact. So now they're trying to change the name. They're trying to have, anyway, the whole thing's so many shenanigans, but basically those are some of the concerns, because the other concern that I learned through all my research on engineering is the way that the electricity actually goes through the machine. There's spikes because, Electrical current is not as stable as it should be. And those spikes cause little microscopic damage to the membrane, to the metals, on top of what we're already talking about. And that causes more things to be released. And when I saw I've seen a lot of lab reports. When I saw the lab reports of what was in these membranes, I was like, this is nuts. Why in the world would you do this for your health? Because in my opinion, this is where these potential dangers, can come into play. I can tell you the one thing that I saw in a lab report on some of the, I'm cautious in saying this right now. I'll just say I saw things that I wouldn't want in my body. Let's just leave it at that for right now. So those are some, I don't know if that answers some of your questions.
Well, yeah, I've got more, right? So my understanding, I think, is the membrane is used to separate the oxygen from the hydrogen, right? And there is a thing called gray gas where you've got hydrogen and oxygen, and that might have some benefits. Speak to me about that. You make a face of concern. So let's start there. So I think there are people who will tout the benefits of gray water. This is not the RV gray water. Let's be very clear about that. If you go on a recreational vehicle, gray water means something very different and absolutely non-consumable. But gray water in the context of hydrogen genesis or electrolysis is the combination of H2 and separate O that you might consume. So talk about that. You made a face of concern.
Yeah, there's numerous issues with that, in my opinion. First of all, the ratios. So again, looking back at nature, if we look at Lourdes, France, was there oxygen and hydrogen? Were they doing both? No, it's pure hydrogen, and it's pure hydrogen for a reason. Anybody, and there's not many people who know this, but anybody who was to do research on oxygen therapy, you're going to learn that it's very, very important to do proper protocols with oxygen, because doing too much oxygen is actually very dangerous for a human. It causes numerous medical issues. It actually throws the imbalance of the body off because, for example, if we supplement oxygen for too long, our body will literally make less red blood cells because our body is adapting to the amount of oxygen that's coming into our system. What a lot of people don't realize is that professional athletes oftentimes actually do the opposite. They mimic or simulate high altitude training with less oxygen so that the body will produce more red blood cells. So oxygen therapy has its pluses. We know the data, there's data, but you don't want to do it all the time. I mean, that's very clear. You do not want to be supplementing oxygen all the time. So why would you put it with your hydrogen all the time? Because the ratio at which you use each one is very different. The only people who do this gray gas that you're talking about are people who don't actually know what they're talking about. No medical professional that knows about hydrogen does that. And not to mention the fact that when they do it medically, and there's reasons for it sometimes to use oxygen and hydrogen, they're using medical grade gases. So you have medical pure hydrogen in a tank, and you have medical grade oxygen, and then they have flow meters so they can basically give the amount that is needed for the patient depending on what they're going through. But the problem with the devices that you're talking about is they don't actually regulate anything. They just electrolyze the water, and whatever amount is in it, which is a ratio of 30 something odd percent to 60 something odd percent, which is what's in water. And issue is that there's also other gases present, Chris. See, this is the fundamental problem. You're not having two medical grade gases in tanks. You're actually producing more than just two gases. I don't know if you understand that or know that. A lot of people don't understand that there's other gases that are being produced, and they're either not telling you or they don't even know, the people who sell this stuff. So there's other gases and other concerns, because when you're sending electricity through water, you have to remember that if there's anything else in the water, that electricity will actually affect those different compounds in water and potentially make them dangerous. I don't know if you're with me, if you understand.
Yeah, so I think you would normally use either a distilled water or maybe a water filtered through osmosis, right? So that's going to get some of the cleaner waters. And so if you're doing that and you're generating, well, let's go back to the membrane, right? I think ostensibly it's supposed to separate the oxygen from the hydrogen. And so what kind of membranes would be acceptable? Like, I understand DuPont and, some of the names. I've worked with lots of different membranes here in the lab, but it's been a while. What are some membranes that would not be acceptable, and versus the ones that would be acceptable in terms of what material are they made out of?
So, in my personal opinion, this is why I think it's such a problem right now. Almost every single hydrogen machine out there is using a membrane that I personally would never use. So that's almost every single one, as far as the ones from China and again Korea and whatever. The Japanese, and this is again the number one hydrogen company in the world that didn't. The story of the guy who created the machine is actually unbelievable. But this particular guy was like, I don't want anything coming out of China. I don't want my machine made in China. And he actually got help from top engineers in Japan, from Toyota, Yamaha, G-Shock, these really big companies. And they were lab testing membranes, which I thought this is fascinating. And so they had to literally develop their own membrane. So it's the only membrane that I know of that, in my personal opinion, is safe, or the one that I would use. And it's a special membrane that was developed by the Japanese. It's a Japanese membrane. Nobody uses it. One of the things that I've learned about hydrogen is the reason that nobody tries to develop this stuff or use the real high-end stuff is because it cuts into profits. And that's what I learned. I literally learned this when I was doing research in Japan, because all my research led me to the best machine, because I was just trying to look at facts. I didn't look at price. I didn't look at anything. I just wanted the best. And when I found this company that was ironically the number one company, I didn't know at the time. And every time I would email different hydrogen companies and ask questions, I realized how much nobody knew. Everybody would give you a different answer. Nobody knew the right answers. And when I reached this Japanese company, they really knew what they were talking about on such a level that there's stuff like membranes. I never even thought about membranes potentially being dangerous. And because of the lab tests that they were doing, I was able to also learn a lot about that process. But it's not just the membrane, it's the amount of electricity also, and how
Mm.
stable it's, because these things will destroy membranes in time. And so you have to be, concerned about what you're going to be using. So I hate to say it, but I would say most membranes are not to my personal standard as far as safety and purity. And the Japanese, they developed this. It's one of the reasons that I was telling you that a lot of the doctors in Japan that are true hydrogen specialists, they're like, this is the only machine we literally use for ourselves, is what I was learning. The doctor's like, I use this for myself, and it's the only one that I recommend for my patients. So I've been learning a lot from the Japanese myself, because there's a lot of stuff that they don't use nor allow in their country that we allow here in America.
Yeah, I think was just doing a quick search. PTFE are a classic filter that you would use if you're trying to get down into micron size, or polyethylene. And I can imagine, does that ring a bell? Is that what the standard filters are?
Filters or membranes?
Membranes, because the membranes and filters are effectively the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I saw. I won't even say what membrane it was, so
Mm.
that way I don't need.
Yep.
But basically, what I saw in the lab reports that concerned me was PFAS, which is what they call forever chemicals.
Yep.
And PFAS is a very nasty, nasty thing. If anybody wants to research that.
Yeah, thing to avoid, and it wouldn't surprise me if that comes out of a membrane that's called polyethylene. So that makes sense. I wonder what material they're using. Maybe you're not even privy to it. Like, that'd be fascinating to understand. I mean, you can use, I'm sure you can use ceramic filters. Those are actually kind of harder to work with, but well known. Do you know, or is that something you can share, or?
All I know is that it's some type of fiber. Actually,
Mm.
it's fiber in nature, and
Okay.
all the membranes use a single membrane. They're using this fibrous that creates, I believe, like 3 layers.
Okay.
And what they also discovered, so everything that they do is they're trying to use higher end everything. The
Right.
metal is plated. Everybody else is using plated metals or stainless steel. The Japanese company for the product that I use does not use any plated metals. They're the only hydrogen company in the world that doesn't use plated metals. Does that not boggle your mind? I think it's just crazy that
Yeah.
nobody's talking. And that's the first thing. And then, of course, the membrane. So the things that they uncovered are also how to send the electrical current. And then they have a dual chamber system. Again, the machine that I like, if people want to like look at it or read about it, the official website's called holyhydrogen.com. But they have a dual chamber system with a level of technology that uses super low electricity. So what they're using super high end, the metals, the membranes, while using a technology that allows to use very, very little electricity. So that way you have super strong components that are not falling apart due to high amounts of electricity or any chemical used. It's really brilliant the way that they did it. And then, of course, it wanted to reach all the levels that you would need for hydrogen to be therapeutic. That's another one that people don't talk about enough. They don't tell you how to use hydrogen correctly so that you actually, get the benefits that one would want. So, I don't know if that really answers your question,
Yeah, well,
but
I want to shift gears a little bit. It does to some degree. I think it's a non-standard membrane. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and really address two things. I want to talk a little bit about your protocols. We're in good time. Before we get to your protocols, the best way to consume H2, right? So you mentioned tablets, and I think those are usually manganese, right? That gets dropped in water. Stay away from those. And then there are some that you can actually consume and ostensibly turn into hydrogen in your stomach, I would imagine. Any kind of quick comment on those?
I am not a fan of any tablet that you would either consume or drop in water for a chemical reaction, because here's one of the things that's really special about hydrogen. Hydrogen has no other ingredient. There is no ingredient. It's just pure hydrogen. Again,
Yep.
odorless, colorless, tasteless. It's of highest purity, and that's the way that it's used by medical professionals. Or to create a chemical reaction, how many ingredients? It's the same thing with food. When I consume my food and I look at the ingredients and what I consume, it's typically just one. Like I buy carrots, what's the ingredient? It just says carrots. I buy beets, everything is just one ingredient. It's very simple. The moment you start buying things with all these ingredients in it, I've found that that's not really the best, in my opinion. There's a lot of shenanigans that go into producing these things. So I'm in the same boat with hydrogen. I don't want any ingredients in my hydrogen, and those tablets clearly have all these ingredients. Just not a fan. And one of these days, it was very interesting. I actually had a laboratory. There's a guy who runs a laboratory, actually a few of them, who have reached out to me based on my channel and seen me on some shows, because they've done lab tests on a lot of this stuff. And the guy basically contacted me and said, look, you've been right about this. He goes, if you want to see some of the lab reports, and I looked at them and I just couldn't believe what I'm seeing, because I think this is going to come out in the future. I can't believe that people are either promoting it or even taking it, because in my opinion, it's a huge concern. And I really hope it's out here in the near future, because when they see what's in there, I think a lot of people will regret taking such things. It's quite horrible, actually, in my opinion.
All right, so let's say we've got good H2. We could drink it, we could inhale it. If it's in the water, we could bathe in it. What would be the best way to get exposure, to consume it, to use it, from a medical perspective?
So the best way, as far as, the average person being able to do it at home, because you can't go somewhere and necessarily have it done. The best protocols that I've created are actually a combination of water and the hydrogen gas inhalation. You actually don't really just want to do one or the other. Now, if you were going to choose one, I hands down choose the water. The water is foundational. And again, back to nature, that's how we found it, right? The Lord's water in France. But I developed a protocol where I actually drink the water actually on an empty stomach. So my protocols have been copied even by professionals. And I don't know why nobody came up with this, but I'm the one who did, where I use it on an empty stomach. And I found profound benefits through actually consuming the hydrogen, again, empty stomach, and then inhaling the gas afterwards. And that was a trick that I came up with, and it was copied by a lot of professionals, and they did do scientific studies proving that I was actually correct. So that seems to be one of the best ways to do it, is that particular combination. And I do it during certain times of the day, but of course, I do personal consults, because you have to be cautious if you're on certain pharmaceuticals. So if you're on stuff for diabetes, stuff for blood pressure, maybe even stuff for cholesterol, you need to know how to use it and what to watch out for. So you can't just go and, it's not like you just go and drink one glass of water and you think that this is going to fix everything. You have to understand the proper levels and how to use it, and also things that you want to be cautious about avoiding, depending on, issues that you might have. So, and then I have special protocols for like the eyes, even the ears, actually, and especially for dementia and Alzheimer's. I pair them with actually certain foods, as crazy as that sounds. I even have some protocols where you literally inhale the hydrogen gas while you eat. One of the beautiful things about hydrogen gas that was discovered by the #1 university in the world that actually researches hydrogen is a Japanese university, Keio University, and they discovered that hydrogen actually appears to open up ghost vessels, which is unbelievable, because of how I've used that information with the techniques, that I created in my protocols. Are you aware of ghost vessels?
No.
Okay, it's a medical term. You guys can look it up. But basically, what it is we have these blood vessels that, as you age, don't even get blood in there anymore. So they're like a
Mm.
ghost vessels, and people have to understand that our blood that is circulating through our body is carrying nutrients. It's also carrying gases, and so you want it to get to these particular areas of the body to bring all the nutrients and these beautiful gases, to these different areas of the body for quote unquote healing and whatnot. And so I've combined that with techniques that I use, for example, with natto. Have you ever heard of natto?
Nope.
Natto is a
Natto.
ferment. Yeah, it's a fermented bean from Japan. Tons of research, super amazing for your health. It's the only food in the world, or at least known in existence, that has a special enzyme called nattokinase, which a lot of people heard about, learned about because of Japanese research and its positive effects on spike proteins and stuff, which we probably shouldn't talk about much. But I don't want to get your channel in trouble, but also the way that it actually thins the blood. So it's like a natural blood thinner. And so I combine that with certain foods that cause the body to produce nitric oxide with the hydrogen that opens up these ghost vessels. And also the way the hydrogen helps the blood move is very impressive. My video 68, I show an actual live blood analysis in Japan from a laboratory. I have all sorts of stuff on my channel that I share. So I use all this knowledge to create, the protocols in order to get that blood flow, get blood to the right places, overcome those nutritional deficiencies, and really help even with proper levels of oxygen in the blood. And we were talking about oxygen a little while ago, but what people don't realize is we're already getting roughly 21% oxygen in our atmosphere. So a lot of times it's about how your body utilizes that oxygen properly. A lot of people who have trouble with their saturation or levels of oxygen in their blood, it's not that you're not getting enough oxygen, is that your body's not really using it properly, because there's a problem, within the body. Not that you have to give necessarily more oxygen all the time. And so these are just a lot of things that I've learned to address, throughout my years of creating my protocol, or protocols actually, because I have different ones for different things.
So, and bathing in H2, so having H2 bubble and ostensibly dissolve in water. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think it's really silly. Not silly in the sense that it wouldn't be good for you. I think it can be good for you, definitely has a lot of benefits. The major problem with is, how in the world are you going to saturate an entire tub with hydrogen? It's ridiculous, because, first of all, when you're trying to dissolve hydrogen gas in hot water, it's so, I mean, unless it's a cold bath, right? But in hot water, the hydrogen escapes so quickly that it's really almost impossible. I'm not gonna say it's impossible, but it's getting there. You can't saturate hydrogen. So when you have a giant tub, like the machine, again, back to the machine that I'm using, 1.5 liters of water takes half an hour to fully saturate 1.5 liters, which is not much water. What
Right.
about a giant tub? You're going to be running a machine. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's silly, that people even sell these products, because I did try them myself. I bought a very expensive system from Japan. It ended up being an absolute waste of money. And I actually found a company that does this correctly, and the equipment's it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So how are you going to buy that for your home unless you're ridiculously wealthy? No average person will be able to have a hydrogen tub. I just think it's a gimmick and kind of silly in my opinion.
Okay, so drink it or inhale it. Any concerns with like inhaling too much, displacing oxygen? Like if I just have some device that's pumping out hydrogen and I'm breathing it, that could be a problem, I would guess.
Yeah, my first concern is the purity. I have seen already lab tests on this, and it is of huge concern for me. That's the first thing. Second, the levels are, so I like the levels to be, I personally use the levels that are being used by major university hospitals in Japan. So I'm mimicking their data. And, a lot of companies are trying to sell machines that have higher levels, claiming that more is better. But I don't think people realize that you always want to be cautious with that. And there's a lot of people out there who even claim to be professionals, actually, who are, in my personal opinion, giving bad info, because it's not based. Well, again, I like to go off of the professionals in Japan because they seem to be the number one in the world. They're the guys who discovered all this and are using it medically. And some of the stuff that they've done and some of the discoveries are huge, Chris. Like we were talking about the name of my channel, the word uprising. There's a lot of meaning behind it. But the thing that I discovered about hydrogen is not just that it's amazing for your health, but it appears to me not only to be very powerful anti-aging, but also a very spiritual molecule. I call it the ascension molecule because that's literally what it does. When you separate oxygen and hydrogen, hydrogen actually ascends. Oxygen actually drops to the ground. It's a heavier molecule. It's also larger than hydrogen. And so, in my opinion, this is something that is kind of important to know. And this ascension molecule has everything to do with life. I think you're going to love this. It's one of my favorite things because in Japan, they were using hydrogen. I just used it actually on somebody who had a stroke, who couldn't talk, couldn't walk, couldn't dress themselves. Doctors were unable to solve this poor girl's problem for almost 2 years now. She is now walking, talking, and able to dress herself just by doing these protocols that I've been developing. And it's unbelievable. I actually have a beautiful letter that was written to me from one of her family members that made me cry because she basically said, "You gave me my daughter back." This pro 20s. So this was a very sad story originally. But in Japan, what they discovered, there's an ancient scripture that says life is in the blood. Okay. And this is really simple. If I put a rubber band around my arm and I don't get blood to my arm, what's going to happen to it?
It's going to get
die.
gangrene and it's going to fall off. Yeah.
And
Not
so,
good.
right. So we know that there's life in the blood, right? But I don't think anybody discovered this. I basically discovered this by reading this data in Japan that when somebody has a stroke, and if they're not getting any blood supply to a part of the brain, we know what's going to happen to that part of the brain. This is why when they restore, blood flow, a lot of times people still have all these symptoms because there was death going on, right, in that part of the brain. The Japanese discovered that if you inhale hydrogen gas and it starts going to the brain, even though the area is not getting blood, that part of the brain still stays alive, Chris. I don't know if that to be mind-blowing. My mind was blown. I was like, this is crazy. That shows us hydrogen is the life molecule, my friend. It is the source of all life, actually, because think about water, it's mostly hydrogen, but also think of the sun. The sun is almost entirely hydrogen. I mean, it's also part helium, but what do you think helium is? Helium is another form of hydrogen. And so that's the real life. And life is what gives us the anti-aging. It's what gives us the health, so much life in us. Not to mention, I also have video footage from an actual medical center in Japan. They specialize in dementia and Alzheimer's, and they're using thermal imaging and the effects that hydrogen has on the temperature, core body temperature of the body. A lot of people, the Japanese are the ones who discovered this. They discovered that almost every single cancer patient, their core body temperature is lower than it's supposed to be. So there is an effect on the temperature is correlated to actually medical issues, and hydrogen shows to increase this core body temperature. There's just so many things that it's doing. It's so beautiful, actually. I'm in love with it, clearly.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well,
and it saved my life.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I want to get into our wrap-up questions and then give people some contact details, how they can follow you. We'll give out your channel again and make sure that's in the show notes. So as a wrap-up for this longevity podcast, I first have the question, Greg, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Well, it's always going to depend on, quality of life versus how long. It'd be nice to make it to 100 if I continue to feel really great.
I love it. And then how long do you think humans can live?
I always find some of the people's opinions on this real silly because I think it's very clear that we can't make it past 120s maximum. And that's really based on just, the human body at this time. But I actually this is kind of weird, but there's a device that one of these days I hope to build and want to work on with some professionals. I believe that I have a device. It's going to be expensive to build, but I believe it would allow the human body to live quite a long time. And I presented some of this data actually to a UCLA scientist / doctor because he thought it was insane. He didn't think it was real, but I showed him some of the medical data and some scientific evidence to prove my hypothesis. And by the time 2.5 hours of a conversation between him and I, He's like, dude, I think this actually might work. Now you just need the funding, because I think I've
Wow.
discovered a secret. The body live a very long time, actually.
Very cool. All right. Other than that secret, what are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
I think the easiest thing is super clean water. So I'm really, because if you were to see what I see in water, you'd be shocked. And of course, that's affecting us, in my opinion, in numerous negative ways. It's unbelievable, the stuff in water, by the way. It's scary, is what it is. And then adding hydrogen to it. I think that is the easiest thing you can do for longevity and health, because then we start getting into diet and exercise and sleep. And by the way, all those things are great, but I've never seen anything, like hydrogen. So I think hydrogen is definitely it. And there's ways that the world doesn't know about yet either, that I haven't shared, and no professional knows. But I've discovered ways to use hydrogen in different ways that nobody's ever actually thought of. And as crazy as this may sound, um, it's because here, I'm going to share something that's going to sound ridiculous. But first of all, the Japanese know water better than anybody. Have you ever heard of this book?
No.
Okay, it's called The Hidden Messages in Water, right? And they discovered that you can talk to water, play music to water, all this stuff. And who wrote it? Of course, it was a Japanese guy. And people have talked about this a lot. And it sounds very foo-foo. I thought it was at first, but there's actually a lot of evidence that, water clearly reacts to a lot of input. Well, people don't know that the word hydrogen actually means that which becomes water. Okay,
Mm.
it's actually what water. It literally becomes water, and there's certain ways to use it that again will even transform people spiritually. So there's information within it that we haven't been able to hack, and actually I found a way to hack a lot of it, and that's where I literally came up with the idea for creating the device that can prolong not only human life. I actually believe it would make almost all medical conditions go away. So I know it's a very bold statement. Hopefully someday I hope to work with some people who could potentially make this a reality for many humans, because it breaks my heart, all the suffering in the world, all the sick people in the world. It ruins your life. I've been through it myself, so I know how much it impacts somebody's family and life. And so I really hope someday that we can do good things.
Very cool. All right. So for the shortcuts, we've got clean water, add hydrogen. What are maybe 1 to 2 things that people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
What they get wrong? Well, in my personal opinion, eating way too much meat. I know I hate bringing this one up because everybody argues about that. But I've seen a lot of the data on it clearly. I think the diet thing, everybody's always arguing about which diet's the best, which diet's not the best. And, I think that whatever is really easiest on the body while being able to get all your nutrients is really, really big. But overeating is a really big problem too. And obviously too much sugar is a problem, and too many chemicals, again, are a problem. So I think those are some of the things that a lot of people are getting wrong, but a lot of people are changing their minds. Like, what's that guy's name? Paul Saladino. I think he used to say, eat nothing but meat, but then he started backtracking and saying, okay, no, now you have to add this. And then he's backtracking. And there's a lot of people in the health industry that I've seen are backtracking from what they originally said. I have never backtracked on anything that I've said because I did my homework before I spoke. And I've literally changed nothing. I've got my protocols down and I follow them regularly. And I don't even think it's that difficult or that complicated. But I think personally, one of the guys who has it right is Brian Johnson. I think Brian Johnson, not only looking at data, but all the protocols he's following are things that I was doing years before he started, to be quite honest with you. But he still seems to not know about hydrogen. He never really talks about it. He's not studying it. And we have so much data on it. Again, not at 50 studies, over 2,000 studies. We know this stuff is the real deal. It's just a matter of how to make it and use it, which is the part that nobody talks about.
Yeah. All right. Greg, the Hydrogen Man, how can people contact you, follow you, connect with you?
If anybody wants to support what I'm trying to do, it's all free to just go to YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, all those places, and just subscribe and share. That's one thing. If people
What
want
are
to
they going
reach
to
me,
search for?
the name of the channel is just Uprising 144K. And if you can't find me like that, you can try Hydrogen Man. And the other way is just by emailing me. My email's uprising144k@gmail.com. I'm very, very busy, so I do my best to respond to people. I do individual consults, but I'm very selective on how I do that these days. So I don't do that for anybody. But the problem is there's a lot of people again suffering, and so it's very hard for me to say no to people, especially when I know how to help them. And I have helped a great many people. I have so many testimonials, pictures, videos, lab tests. I mean, just so much stuff. So, but any support, I'm very grateful and appreciative of it, because again, nobody's talking about the importance of making hydrogen correctly. And I feel like this is an important thing to talk about. Instead, everybody just saying hydrogen is amazing. Well, it is. Just like fruits and vegetables are amazing, but it's important to grow them without chemicals, and even have good soil, with good mineral content. And the Japanese, again, master farmers. I've been learning a lot about how they grow food versus the rest of the world. So there's just so many things that I've been learning actually while being here in Japan. So
very cool. And what in the near future are you excited about?
well, I'm excited about, honestly, the device that I want to build that I really believe will change the world in so many ways on so many levels. Things that, I probably don't have enough time to explain all the things that it could do. We talked about longevity and health, but there's other things that it can do also, which seem like sci-fi. But I have already seen some of it at play. Things like literally like opening, it's so embarrassing to say, I sound like a weirdo, but like opening portals. So I know that sounds really crazy, but there's different things that we can do. There's so many things we can do with hydrogen, by the way. There were ancient cultures that used to know about it a very long time ago. I believe that even places like Atlantis, really, they mastered the science of water. Water has a potential that I don't think the world really understands at this time. And I really hope, I actually feel very confident in the future people are eventually going to discover the things that we can use water for, including infinite energy, by the way, like the sun. The power of hydrogen is unbelievable. So I can't wait.
Very cool. All right. Well, you can find him. Search Uprising 144K, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube. You can email him uprising144k@gmail.com. I know on his YouTube channel, he's got lots of conversations about hydrogen equipment, pros and cons of different hydrogen equipment. So go check him out. Greg, the Hydrogen Man, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for having me again.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.